Hi, this is Trey Hensley, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who plays bluegrass.
My guest on Bluegrass Jam Along this week is Trey Hensley, and it's a slightly funny one because I feel like Trey's been on the podcast before, which of course he hasn't, but I've talked to Marcel Ardans from Lessons with Marcel about him before, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's a treat to have Trey here. So Trey, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so it's great to be on here.
Thank you. I was chatting to Marcel from Lessons with Marcel a while ago, and I was going through his sort of transcriptions on his website, and I noticed he'd got a lot of Tony Rice there, obviously, and he's transcribed quite a lot of Billy Strings and quite a lot of Molly Tuttle. And I said to him, should we have a chat about those players, and you can tell me sort of what it is about them that you really like and what makes them them? He said, yeah, can we do that? He said, can we also talk about Trey Hensley? I was like, great, yeah, like let's add that name to the list. And so I ended up chatting to Marcel about you quite a lot, and as a result, reading a bit more about you and listening to a bit more about you. And I thought, well, why not ask you direct rather than talk about you? Let's get you on the podcast. And so here you are. You're on the nominee list for IBMA Guitar Player of the Year this year. And when you read that list, Billy Strings, Cody Kilby, Bryan Sutton, Molly Tuttle, and Trey Hensley, that's a hell of a list.
Yes, I'm not sure how I ended up there, but it's a thrill. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is year number 3 of being nominated, and it's my 3rd year of wondering why, but I'm thrilled. It's really cool. Obviously 4 of my favorite guitar players, and so yeah, I mean I love the IBMA. I've been going to the IBMA since I was a kid, since I started playing, and never, ever thought that I would be on the list, so it's super cool. I'm not sure how it happened, but I'm thrilled with it.
It's really cool, and there's a lot of people out there, I'd imagine, are really pleased for you, because there's a lot of people who do know sort of how it happened. There's a lot of people who love your playing out there. So, but you sort of said then that you've been going there since you were a kid, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that, because you started playing pretty young. I mean, a lot of people started playing pretty young, but you had quite a sort of quick rise into the sort of gigging, sort of professional, semi-professional touring life in your teens, really, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I started playing when I was 10, and before that, I just sang, and I'm not really sure how it happened, but I started singing with this little bluegrass group out in East Tennessee, where I'm from. And so, yeah, I made like cassette tapes when I was 6, and I made 3 of them when I was 6 and 7 and 8. So I've been playing music, on as a profession for a long time. And yeah, I started playing guitar when I was 10, and I guess I went to the IBMA for the first time when I was 10 or 11. And yeah, I've done several, showcases there. I think I did my first one at IBMA in 2013 with Tom T. Hall, and so that was kind of my introduction into the IBMA, and I've been a member for a long time, and yeah, it's like I love the award show, and again, it's like to be nominated is very cool, and so yeah, I mean this has been a long time. I'm 31 now, so I've been playing music for 2 decades at this point, and it's kind of all I know.
And what was on those first tapes you were making when you were sort of 7, 8, 9 years old? What were they? Your songs? Were they sort of country standards, bluegrass songs?
Yeah, kind of bluegrass standard things, and some very horrible singing. So I was on those records. Yeah, so I mark those off as just kind of something that I did when I was a kid. But I made my first CD, my actual first thing, when I was 11, I guess, and it was produced by Tom T. Hall, and it was the first thing I'd actually been playing guitar, and I remember working up guitar breaks for all the songs, and yeah, we recorded 14 songs on that CD, and we recorded them all in one day, mixed them the next day, and had a record, and so I kind of I've just went into the business thinking that's how you made a CD, and that's pretty. Tom T kind of worked, in the Stanley Brothers fashion of, you start a record in the morning and you have a record afternoon. You have something to sell. And obviously, it doesn't always work like that. But yeah, I mean, it's like I said, that seems like forever ago. But yeah, that was when I was a kid and kind of my introduction into this thing.
And was the guitar playing sort of primarily to accompany yourself singing then, or was it more about wanting an instrument in its own right as well?
Yeah, it started out as an accompanying thing, and then it quickly became, my obsession with music was my guitar playing. And it's like I loved singing, but not long after I picked up a guitar, I didn't care if I ever sang another note, as long as I could play. And I still feel that way. It's like I sing, I'm in this duo with Rob Ickes, and most of our songs are songs that I sing. And it's only because I sing, it's not like I love singing and that's what I'm going to do. And I just play guitar to accompany my singing. I'm a guitar player that kind of sings, and so that's it. It started out as like, hey, I'm just going to get something to play rhythm while I sing, into being, I'm a guitar player.
And was there something in particular? Was there like a particular record you heard that sort of kicked off the real guitar obsession, or was it just like playing it and loving the sounds and just took it from there?
It's a little of both. The reason that I played guitar originally was I went to a Bluegrass Festival and saw Charlie Waller play. And he was the first guy that I think I ever saw. He didn't play much. Like, he mostly played rhythm, but he played Under the Double Eagle at this show. And that was the first time I'd ever really, witnessed that live. Somebody playing notes on a guitar and not just strumming and playing rhythm. And that was kind of the eureka moment. It's like, hey, I want to do that. I want to, play notes and play guitar breaks. And then it really kind of hit when I first learned, like when I played Wildwood Flower. It's like, of course, that's the song most people start out with. But like when I put those notes together and heard it coming back out of the guitar, it's like, okay, that's what I want to do. And it's still that way, man. It's like I still get excited when I learn something that I want to learn, or if I, figure out new things on the guitar. I'm just kind of always trying to chase that feeling,
Yeah, and I sort of wonder with it's like something like bluegrass. You learn a classical instrument, and the first things that you learn are maybe really simple, and maybe you don't ever go back and play them again. But if Wildwood Flower is the first thing you really learned, I would imagine you still play that and still get a huge amount of pleasure out of playing it. It's not like there's something really deep about the simple stuff sometimes.
It is. That music still kind of gets me. I was just a big Flatt and Scruggs fan. My granddad had a bunch of records, and he had a lot of Flatt and Scruggs, but he had one that just really kind of lit me on fire. It was this Flatt and Scruggs do the famous songs of the Carter Family. And it's not really a standard Flatt and Scruggs album. It's one that Earl mostly plays guitar on. And just something about that, it's like, and then, Rob and I just played at the Earl Scruggs Festival, the first annual Earl Scruggs Festival. And it got me back into listening to that record. And there's something beautiful about that, the simplicity of that Carter Family music and that style of guitar playing. And it always served the song. It was never flashy. It was never in your face. It was just the melody of the song. And I think it always comes back to that. It's like that. There's cool stuff you can do on the guitar, but it always comes back to the melody. So it's I still love the Wildwood Flower. That's a long way of answering that question.
Yeah, it's really sort of shocked the first time I read some liner notes and realised that it was Earl actually playing the guitar on some of those tracks, because his guitar playing is great.
It is, man. It's that was kind of why I started playing, was that, and reading his name on that liner note, it was kind of like, that's when I first played the Opry was with Earl, and so I got to learn a lot of those guitar parts. and from him, and got to ask him a bunch of those questions. And it was, yeah, it's like it wasn't really Merle Travis style. It wasn't really Mother Maybelle style. It was kind of his own thing, you know, and you know, it's really, really cool that a lot of it feels like his banjo playing, you know, it's like he did a lot of rolls with his fingers that kind of felt like banjo playing. So yeah, I mean, it was a totally unique thing.
Yeah, I sort of Scruggs style guitar as much as Scruggs style banjo in a way. It's just, you know, him coming out of the instrument. And that was pretty young. You first played the Opry. Were you sort of around 10? Is that right?
11. Yeah, I started playing when I was 10. I think I'd been playing for around 9 months when I played the Opry that first time. And
wow.
Yeah, I'd met Marty Stewart. I was a big fan of his, and he was playing this local fair out in East Tennessee, and my dad got us backstage tickets, and I was going to get him to sign my guitar case. That was the whole reason that I wanted to go, you know, and so I ended up going, meeting him. He was very nice, and he let me play a couple songs on the guitar for him while he was signing autographs, and I played Wildwood Flower and Jimmy Brown the Newsboy, and he recognized that I had learned it from Earl, because there was, you know, those particular Earl licks. And so, yeah, he invited me to play on the Opry a couple months after that. And that's where I met Earl. Marty kind of, since he recognized that, he asked Earl if he would come out and play with us, and Earl did. And then, you know, that's how I met Rob for the first time, was through Earl Scruggs a couple months after that. And so, yeah, it's been a snowball from there.
And you and Rob have been playing together for quite a few years now, haven't you?
Yeah, 8 or 9 years, something like that. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but yeah. And I've known him since I was 12 or 13. So yeah, been a while.
And it's an interesting. I'm always a fan of hearing acoustic stuff in duet settings, because you get to hear a bit of space around things, and you get to hear where things fit. And I know, obviously, you guys have other stuff on the records as well. It's not always just the two of you, but there's something fascinating about a duet setting, and guitar and dobro together is quite an unusual combination, but it really works. It's a really cool sound.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it's you know, it kind of came about organically, just a jam session, you know, at Rob's house, and then yeah, we did that first record, just, you know, kind of like he was wanting to do a solo record, and he decided to do this record with me, and we just went in. I mean, we cut that one in 2 days, I guess. You know, we did all the acoustic tracks one day and all the electric tracks another day, and everything on there was, you know, was a single take. You know, there's no overdubs, and that's the way we've done every record since then. But you know, that was kind of the beginning of like, hey, this is kind of a unique thing, and it's fun. Let's see where this goes, and yeah, we're still seeing where it's going.
And that electric thing's interesting, because I think I heard you say at one point, or read you say somewhere, that, you know, certainly for a while you got more electric sessions than acoustic sessions, and actually play a lot of electric guitar as well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't touch an acoustic guitar for several years, probably, you know, 3 or 4 years before I moved to Nashville. I had been playing in this little like rock and roll band, you know, and doing all the electric stuff. And so when Rob and I started playing together, that was kind of my reintroduction to playing more bluegrass, you know. And I always played bluegrass at home, so I shouldn't say I didn't touch an acoustic guitar. But as far as playing live, playing out, I didn't really play much acoustic at all. And so, yeah, that was great. And, you know, sometimes we still do these half acoustic, half electric shows. It's pretty rare at this point. We used to do them about once a month, but you know, still bring out the electrics every now and then.
And did that affect the way you play an acoustic? I mean, it strikes me that you bend strings a lot more than the average dreadnought player does, and that's, you know, it's unusual to hear people employ bends as much as you do.
It definitely did. I think that, you know, it's like I got way into blues players, and you know, it's like for some reason, it just kind of one of these days that I was playing. I don't think I really did it before I met Rob and started playing mostly acoustic. But it's like, I guess because I had been playing so much electric, that first time when I got back on acoustic, I just started bending, and yeah, it's like, before that I'd kind of done a few little Tony Rice kind of bends, that were little half step bends or things like that, and yeah, I don't. I'm not really sure why it started happening, but I think it does kind of spawn back to the electric guitar playing.
Yeah, and Tony Rice is one of those people who the way he employs bends, he doesn't necessarily use loads and loads of them, but when he does, there's an amazing bend at the kickoff, at the beginning of the sort of solo for I've Waited As Long As I Can, that just starts with this incredible bend that just smacks you around the face. And there's another one. I mean, pretty much every time I interview a guitar player, we end up talking about Tony Rice. But I know you've talked a lot about the influence that he's had on you. And I remember you saying at one point almost something along the lines of, "I have to limit my Tony Rice intake sometimes."
I do. It's like I spent a lot of years. I've been playing guitar for 2 decades. For over half of it, I wanted to just play Tony. It's like that's all I wanted to do was sit and listen to Tony records and play those licks. And yeah, I think I had a similar event that happened, like a lot of people that do that. This great guitar player came up to me one time. I'll leave him out of it, but he said, "There's already one Tony," and it's like, okay, that makes sense, And it's kind of like, if you listen to early Tony, there's a lot of Clarence in there, but it morphed into being Tony. And that was that was another lightning bolt. Like, okay, Tony did Tony better than I'll ever be able to do it. So, maybe I'll see what I sound like. And another big thing was seeing Tony live and hearing him do a John Coltrane song. And it's like, okay, well that, Tony listens to a lot of different stuff, and he's obviously taken influences from other people and other places. I'll try to do that, and that'll be another way to tip my hat to Tony that's not stealing his licks, And so, yeah, I feel like Tony was influential far beyond his guitar playing. It's like that. Just listening to other stuff happened because of Tony. So it's like, you can get inspired by Tony in a lot of different aspects.
Totally. Yeah, and people talk about the rhythm playing as the thing, but other people talk about the way he listened to music and the way I spoke to Dan Tominski recently, who talked a lot about how Tony reacted to other musicians, and it's not just about the licks he played; it's about the whole approach. But it's like you were saying about sort of playing all those licks and somebody come up and saying, "Oh, there's already been one Tony and we don't need another one." Tony talked pretty openly about how he spent a lot of time trying to be Clarence and sort of realised that he couldn't, and that's how he ended up being him. And that's part of the process as any musician, isn't it? Is you find the bits you like and you sort of take them apart to see how they work, and you eventually put them back together into something slightly different than they started off.
Exactly. I've just even like reading the Miles Davis book a couple years ago, him talking about, playing Louis Armstrong licks or when he played with Charlie Parker and all that stuff rubbing off. And it's like, well, yeah, you can hear Tony, back in those days playing the Clarence stuff, and you can hear it slowly evolve. And it's the natural progression of a true musician is like wanting to continue that search, into the next thing.
Yeah, like, talk about Miles Davis, somebody who did exactly the same, never sort of rested, never stuck with the same band or the same idea or something. You wander off into something hyper arranged and then go off into just that constant quest for something new that makes people exciting to listen to, isn't it? But I also remember you talking about Roy Nichols on the Merle Haggard records being a huge influence as well.
We'll be right back with you just after this. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins. If you're attending the NAMM show in January, stop by the Collings booth to say hello to the team, get hands-on with their selection of customised acoustics and electrics, and check out some exciting new prototypes they're working on for 2024. They'll also have a few of their world-class artists on hand demoing various instruments. And if you can't attend, don't forget to follow their Instagram and Facebook accounts throughout the show for photos, videos, and the latest news. Collings guitars are hand-built from the Sound Up in Austin, Texas. This episode is also brought to you by Peghead Nation, the home of roots music instruction. If one of your 2024 resolutions is to improve as a musician, Peghead Nation is the place to go. They have 65 streaming video courses for guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, dobro, bass and ukulele from some of the leading names in acoustic music. Courses cover bluegrass, old-time, Irish music and swing, plus lessons dedicated to improvisation, theory and ear training. Your first course is just $20 a month, and you can add more for $10. Try any course free for a month with the promo code JAMALONG. Make 2024 a year of more music at pegheadnation.com.
Yeah, I mean, he was a big influence. Obviously Merle was a big musical influence. But through that, it's like I think I always listened for the guitar playing on these records. And Roy's playing, it just, you hear a lot of this Charlie Parker bebop stuff, and then you hear, a lot of blues bends, and he's another one that was very deep. There was a lot of stuff going on in his playing. I think a lot of my bending came from that, because even if you listen to, his acoustic guitar playing, there's a great video of, I think they're doing Strangers, on some television show in the 60s, and he's playing, the kickoff is so difficult, and it's kind of got all these bebop licks and a huge bend, and it does this close-up of Roy's guitar, and it's like the strings are a mile off the fretboard, and it's a cheap old Stella, and it sounds great, and it's not a pre-recorded track, it's them playing live, and so Roy was a beast, man. He I think, obviously a lot of country guitar players are influenced by Roy. And Merle always had great guitar players. Another one was Clint Strong that played with Merle in the 80s. That he was a jazz guy. And, it's like you listen to a Hag record and you're going to hear a lot of great guitar playing. And so, yeah, he was kind of one of those that I really went down that road pretty heavily. Listening to Merle Haggard records for a lot of reasons. There's great songs and great singing, but there's also, a killer band. So yeah, I mean, I think, and you can hear a lot of different influences in Roy's playing, like you could hear a lot of different influences in Tony's playing. And I think I'm drawn to a lot of those type of guitar players, And
that's sort of, like some of the early country stuff, the guitar playing is really interesting. Like you listen to some of the Hank Williams records, and the solos are quite jazzy in places. They're quite there's a lot of sixth and everything, and it's not they're not. There's much more swing, and there's much more. They're not quite as defined as things maybe became a bit later, and it's a really interesting period. Those sort of some of the early country recordings.
Yeah, it's we were just listening to some Bob Wills stuff, and it's the same way. It's like that's a full on jazz band playing quote unquote hillbilly music. There were some deep players that, I feel like there's a history of that within country and bluegrass guitar. Doc Watson obviously had a lot of influences in the jazz world, and played St. James Infirmary and a lot of jazz songs, and Tony with his jazz records, and so yeah, I mean, it's like there's a lot of that influence, I think.
Yeah, and sort of a lot of the David Grisman stuff that brought some of those players together a bit later as well. Tony being one of them, and Mike Marshall, and people who just there's a really interesting. I talked to Paul Coet from Hawktail and Punch Brothers the other day, and just talking about that space and the sort of overlap and that kind of more maybe experimental instrumental side of string band music as well, and such a breadth of stuff in there. And it's really interesting to hear somebody like Sierra Farrell now, who's got quite a swing jazz influence in what she does that maybe you don't hear quite as much now, or it's interesting to hear it coming back and sounding different.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's always going to be there, and it's always going to influence us in one way or the other. And yeah, it's like I feel like within bluegrass, there's a lot of seekers, or within this acoustic kind of music, you've got a lot of people that want to take in as much music as they can, and so yeah, you're eventually going to go down that road. It's we kind of all travel the same path, and we just get there at different times. So it's a cool thing to see and hear.
It's really interesting because I'm not from the US or a bluegrass background in any way whatsoever, and sort of coming into bluegrass and sort of realizing there's a sort of traditionalist movement who likes to keep things to being pretty straightforward, and there's people who stretch it. But actually, the more I dig in and the more I talk to people, the more I realize it's quite hard to find somebody who was purely a bluegrass musician. Like even Bill Monroe did some duet stuff with Doc Watson that you wouldn't really class as traditional bluegrass, and pretty much everybody did something else as well, and or it was something before it became this set in stone bluegrass thing, and then it drifted off into something else. And actually, most of it's been progressive in some form all the way through.
It has been. I mean, yeah, it's like you've got people that want it to sound exactly like 1946. They want that band, that sound, and I get that. That's a great sound. If you're going to aspire to do something, that's a really high watermark. But that was really progressive for that time, and I feel like Bill was always wanting to push the boundaries. At a certain point, he kind of fell into doing a lot of the same thing, but those early records are really progressive, and he really wanted to push the envelope. And Flatt and Scruggs did the same. They had drums on the records, and the Osborne brothers, and it's like there's a natural progression of it, of pushing the limits. And so it's you're kind of, again, that's like there is a lot of tradition in bluegrass, but I feel like the tradition is to kind of keep pushing the boundary. So within the confines of acoustic music, there's a lot you can do, and so it's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
It's one of the things I love about just how accessible stuff is now, is that, so if I went and bought a bunch of your CDs, I'm not necessarily going to go home with an armful of straight bluegrass recordings, and yet if I follow you on Instagram, I'm going to see you play some fiddle tunes. And I love that you just get to see people do a real mix of stuff, and people aren't maybe quite as defined by their recorded output as they used to be, because you can show other sides of yourself far more easily than that now. Yeah,
I mean, it's there are a lot of different things you can do. It's like talking about Merle Haggard, he did a tribute record to Jimmy Rogers, he did a tribute record to Bob Wills, and that's it's like I often wonder what Hank Williams would have been like on Instagram, or like what would that have been like? Or if Jimmy Martin had a Twitter account, or a YouTube account, it's like would we have those great records? I don't know. I have no idea. But I mean, there's a good and bad side to it. Yeah, it's like you say. I mean, I play a lot of fiddle tunes and stuff when I'm sitting around the house, and like naturally when I pick up a guitar, that's sort of what I go to, and so when I put something up on Instagram, it's usually that, or just me kind of fooling around on guitar. But when I go in to do a record, it's never that. It's always, something that I wrote or a different type of music. And so it's cool that there's a lot of different ways you can have musical output. And I mean, it's like I said, there's good and bad to it, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's just from a sort of fan point of view, it's really cool to see some of it, because you get to see like whoever just sit and play a fiddle tune, he probably wouldn't go and record it, because they've got other stuff they want to get out of there, they've got stuff that they've created and want to share with the world. But it's cool just to see somebody sit and play Blackberry Blossom or whatever.
I agree.
And it's just interesting, and also that just the range of stuff I've heard you talk before about, and it's something I've heard other people talk about, but just the influence or the kind of energy you get listening to metal recordings as well. Like, Billy Strings has talked about this. I know Bryan Sutton is a big Eddie Van Halen fan, and that's sort of, almost the just the energy of something that's like flat out bluegrass, but you can get the same energy from, you know, a Slayer record or whatever. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I got that. I think, you know, like those first days were listening to Tony, and then when I was a teenager, somebody introduced me to Van Halen, and I remember hearing Eruption for the first time, and it's the same energy as, like, you know, Tony playing Sally Gooden or something. You know, it's like that. It had that intensity, and obviously as a guitar player, you're gonna find something that you really love in Eddie Van Halen records, and so I got into that, and it was this friend at school, you know, and he introduced me to Iron Maiden and Slayer and Metallica and all that stuff, and I got as much into that as I did bluegrass, and I don't really play it that much, but I definitely feel like it influenced my playing, and it's like to me it always made sense, like that made as much sense to me as Gold Rush. You know, it's like that I loved it, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And it's like I go through phases now where it's I listen to, you know, as much different stuff as I can. But I'm still a big metalhead and love all that stuff. And it's funny, when I first moved to Nashville was, I guess, around the time that Billy moved to Nashville, and we had talked about doing a Black Sabbath tribute at one point, but it never happened. But, you know, we need to work on that. That would be fun.
That'd be cool. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think particularly if you kind of grew up as a kid listening to like your grandparents' music or whatever, or the Flat and Scruggs, at some point you hit a point where you need something that's yours, and like preferably something that's slightly shocking that your parents or your grandparents wouldn't get. Like when I was a kid, sort of 5, 6, 7, I was listening to my dad's Beatles records and Bob Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel, and I still love all that, and I never stopped listening to it. But as a teenager, like, I also needed something that was my thing, that preferably they wouldn't get, you know. And it's just it's funny finding the same energy in an entirely different place.
Yeah, it's the same here. You know, it's like my parents were very much traditional bluegrass, traditional country, and that was about it. You know, and I remember, I think I just bought an AC/DC album, and I think my dad said something like, "Oh, that's all right, but you don't listen to that in the car," when they were driving. It's like I could listen to that in my room and learn the guitar parts. But so I think there was a part of that. It was like, okay, I need my music, and I feel like about that same time is when I got into Robert Johnson and all this blues stuff, and so I kind of felt like metal and blues and jazz were kind of my little, you know, like I said, I got into that kind of like I did Tony, like I just got obsessed with it and just bought as much music as I could find, and luckily there was this little record shop in East Tennessee. It's closed down now, but this guy that worked there was he was just the greatest guy, you know, and I would go in every day after school, and he would just save stuff for me, you know, and like he would play it in the store while I was there. And so he introduced me to Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and a lot of stuff that I probably wouldn't have heard because my parents weren't into it. And it's like he couldn't believe that I'd never heard the name Led Zeppelin, you know, and so it's like, okay, that changed my playing and my musical life a lot, you know. So it's cool to keep exploring, and I still do that.
Is that something, because you sort of talked about getting obsessed with Tony and then getting obsessed with metal stuff and then sort of finding the blues and the Robert Johnson stuff, do you tend to kind of go deep into a thing for a while? Is that how you operate? I
do. It kind of becomes an issue. You know, it's like I drive everybody crazy just going down. You know, now it's a little different with streaming, and you know, it's like I use Apple Music or Tidal, and so you can get obsessed with a lot of things at the same time. So it's a little different, but used to be, you know, it's like I would buy one record or one CD and just listen to that over and over again, or I was big into box sets, and I still am. just bought this big box set of the complete Louis Armstrong records from like 46 to 60, and I've been way into that. And so, yeah, it's like I do just tend to get into one thing. And, a couple of years ago, I got way into Chuck Berry stuff, and it was funny being out on the road and, Rob kind of being like, okay, that's enough of the Chuck Berry licks. It's like, it just kind of happened, it's like I listen to that stuff and, suddenly you want to play those kind of licks or and it kind of oozes its way into my playing organically, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on it's all trial and error at this point.
Yeah, that's one of the joys of music for me, is just going deep into a thing, just getting excited and wandering off down the road and not looking back for a while. And I spent years listening to opera and going to see opera every couple of weeks, and I hardly do that now, but there's something glorious about just putting the blinkers on and going in one direction for a while.
Yeah, man, it's all about getting excited. It's like that inspires me to play. Like, I don't have a regimen of, I want to practice, 2 hours a day or an hour a day. If I'm not excited, then I'm probably not going to do anything, worthy of remembering on the guitar. I'll still pick it up and play, but if I'm excited about something, then that seems to be when I pick up a lot of stuff and work through things when I'm playing guitar. So I try to keep myself, musically as excited as I can be.
I think that's really cool. I think it's sort of cool and grounding to hear from my sort of perspective, is that, it's easy to think that people in your position sort of, play several hours a day on technique and, and it's whether you're inspired. It's refreshing to hear that maybe some days you're not inspired, or that you need, because I think with music, playing something that you like is, like, particularly with kids in education, being given music to play. If they're not interested, you can teach them as much as you like about music, but if they're not interested in the context you're trying to teach them. So my little boy's 9 and he's learning piano, and his teacher will give him a choice of 3 pieces and go, which of these do you like? And he'll let him learn the one that he likes. And it's great because he's already sort of bought into it a bit, and he's allowed to express himself a bit, and it's really cool. I think, you can sort of sometimes hit kids around the head with music a bit to the point where they just wander off and go, that's not for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very thankful that, I had a guitar teacher when I first started, and I took lessons for about 6 months or a year. And he was great. It's like he taught me things that I wanted to learn, like obviously everybody kind of learns Wildwood Flower, but, I don't know that he would have taught me, how to play these other songs, or, I remember having him teach me the intro to Johnny Cash's Tennessee Flat Top Box. And that's something, it's like he had to sit and learn it and then teach it to me. But I remember being very excited about that and going home and just playing that over and over and over again. And yeah, I've got a 6-year-old daughter, and she's shown a little interest in playing, and that's been my big thing. It's like, let's get started when you're excited about it. And if you're never excited about it, then that's fine too, But if I hadn't have loved it as much as I did, it would have gotten old very quick,
Yeah, it's funny. I heard an interview ages ago with Ronnie McCory, and he was saying that they obviously, as kids, played all the time. There was instruments around, there was music around. It was just, but he doesn't remember a single day that his dad told him to play or sat him down and when you need to practice. You just let him get excited and then motivate himself,
Yeah, I mean, I think my dad was very. He was great, and I'd played baseball before I played guitar, and so I kind of went into guitar knowing that if I wanted to get good at it, I had to practice. But yeah, it's like I think once I started learning tunes, I never really had to be motivated to practice. It was always, like now I feel like that's a big thing, is like I need to be motivated to practice and to play. And, I always practice every day, or always play every day. But yeah, again, it's like I want to be excited and I want to be motivated so I can move my playing forward and not just, play these same licks or these same songs over and over. And I think part of it's like my Instagram posts or whatever. A lot of that is, sometimes when I'll be practicing, it's like I just want to. I'll sometimes record myself just to listen back at certain things, and see what works and what doesn't. And so sometimes I'll just post that. It's like, okay, well, that's my, this is probably crappier than it should be, or I should probably do another take of this. But it's like that's just sort of my practice thing. Is like what of this works and what doesn't, and I try to go about that with even live shows. I don't ever try to play the same guitar solo twice. And that's for better or for worse. It's like a lot of times, like I should have stuck to something I know, but I try to keep myself excited musically, and so that is another way of doing that. It's just kind of jumping into the fire without a safety net. And a lot of times, like it, especially if we're on a long tour, it's like 2 weeks out, and I'm kind of burnt out and I want to go home. It's easy to get back into that repetition of, okay, well, I'm just going to play the same guitar solo tonight, but I have to just talk myself into, no, you're not going to do that. You need to do something new and play something different. And so that gets me excited. It's like trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work still. Because I don't know any theory or anything, so it's just all improvisation of playing by ear and all that good stuff.
That's interesting because I think it can take a certain amount of bravery to do that as a musician, to just go and see what comes out on the night. But we do it like all the time when we have conversations with each other. Like so much of the time, maybe this is me, but so much of the time I only work out what I think about anything when I'm talking to people about it. And you say a bunch of stuff and they say a bunch of stuff, and you kind of work out that's the point of a conversation, not just to deliver a load of stuff you already know. I mean, music it's definitely the same. Is that thing of being able to express new things in the moment and have a live, living, breathing musical chat with somebody else or a bunch of other people. But it can be hard to do because we worry about playing a wrong note or sounding crap or, just completely losing where we are on the fretboard and not knowing where to go. And so we stick to the stuff we know. But I think there's a lot of bravery in that, in just committing every night to just seeing what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a big thing with playing with Rob, was that, because, a lot of times we don't have a band, and even when we do, the only people that are actually taking breaks are me and Rob. So, it's like if we do have a band, we'll just have bass and drums. So it's always us playing the breaks, and I learned really quick from Rob is like he never plays the same thing twice. And there are little cues that we do that, it's like on these extended jams of things, it's like I give him a cue occasionally. It's like, and that may be the same thing, but 98% of what we're doing is all improvised and never the same. And so, yeah, I think that's been the most fun for me. It's like that's gotten me more excited about playing. And so, yeah, I always kind of recommend that, even at jams and stuff, just kind of, it can be easy to sit at home and work on, this is what I'm going to play on Salt Creek whenever we do the jam on Saturday night. But, kind of throw that out the window and you'll learn a lot more.
Yeah, and have you found that playing with Rob, particularly when it is just the two of you playing live, have you had to adapt the way you play at all? Is there certain things that you tend to do in that setting that you wouldn't in others?
Yeah, there's especially rhythmically. I seem to play a lot of bass runs or bass notes. And there's, that like on different songs, I'll do something almost like a mandolin chop. And so I feel like my rhythm drastically changes when it's a duo situation. And sometimes when we have a band, I have to kind of rewire my brain and be like, okay, well, we've got a bass player tonight. I can stick to playing, mostly normal rhythm, So yeah, I feel like that part of it definitely changes. And then with Rob, it's like before this, if I was playing in a band, I didn't get to solo nearly as much as I do when there's just the two of us. So that's been, at first it was a challenge, because it's like, it is like being in a conversation. It felt like I was running out of things to say pretty quick, and so I feel like I've really tried to work on my improvisational stuff over these past 8 years, and that's been great, because Rob's way into jazz stuff, and he's done jazz records, and so he kind of brought that side of it more than I did, maybe. Even though I loved listening to it, I didn't really play any of that. So it's been, I've learned to improvise a lot over these past few years.
And how's that sort of fit in with you saying you don't really know the theory side of it? It's definitely sort of playing by ear more than anything. And how does that sort of reconcile? Because on one hand, a lot of people think you need to fully understand the theory to do anything. And on the other hand, you get a lot of people who think that theory just gets in the way. And for most people, the truth's somewhere in the middle. How have you worked your way towards that?
It's I sometimes I do feel like it's like I would love to learn some theory, so I'll actually know, especially when I'm teaching at camps. It's like I kind of feel like I should be able to explain what I'm doing a little better. But part of it, it's like Rob is pretty similar, and like he knows definitely more theory than I do, but he kind of tosses it aside when he's playing, and I do feel like there's been a lot more trial and error from my end. Like, there's a lot of nights when I'll play and it's like, oh, that definitely didn't work. I know tomorrow night to stay away from that part of the fretboard on that song, or don't play that, don't get started on that idea. But then there's, on the flip side, there's been a lot of times where it's like that didn't work that great, but I think part of it might work. So it's like, it's almost like just taking these little fragments of ideas. And a lot of it is just, listening to other players or listening to other music and having an idea of where this stuff is on the fretboard and kind of just playing it back. And it's to the point now where I just kind of turn my brain off a little bit and just play and, again, just kind of take in what works and what maybe didn't work or what I need to work on. But Rob played with Tony, to kind of bring this back to Tony. Rob played in the Tony Rice unit for 10 years, and he said they never had a rehearsal and they never talked about music before they went out on stage. And there's something pretty awesome about that. Like, just going out there totally without a net, and so I think we go about that to that point. It's like I think we both know like what song we're going to kick off with and what song we're going to end with, and everything else in the middle is whatever we're feeling at the time. And so that's been great and inspiring, and just try to work on what fits and what doesn't.
And I guess the joy of a duo is you've got a bit more. You can be a bit more maneuverable in terms of where you want to go. You're not sort of relying on everybody going to the same place at the same time. If you've got a few signals, you can drop each other and go, we're going over here now. It gives you the freedom to do that.
Yeah. And geographically on stage, I can just walk 2 feet to my left and tell him, hey, I'm gonna go here now. And so that works out, other than having to tell, 5 people, hey, I'm gonna go here now. So that's been fun. And, occasionally, like I said, we do have a band. We're going out this week and we have a band. But even that, it's like we still keep that kind of improvisational thing going, regardless of, what combination of musicians we have.
And is the sort of the recording and touring with Rob, is that sort of what you're up to for the foreseeable future, or should we expect a Black Sabbath tribute album from you and Billy at some point?
You never can tell. No, I mean, Rob and I, we're pretty busy, and we finished up a new record that'll be out in the winter, and I've been writing for a solo record, and I've been planning on working on that this winter too. So, but as far as touring goes, I would say a good 90% of my time will be spent with the Rob and Trey dates, because we're pretty slammed for next year, and it's been great. I really love the duo thing, and I think we're going to do more band shows next year, which will be fun. So yeah, we keep it kind of open to different things, musically. So I feel like I get a lot of what I want to do out, within that project. So yeah, but again, I do want to. I want to work on a solo bluegrass record, and so I think that'll probably happen this winter, and hopefully it'll be out next year sometime. And who knows? I might play a few shows with that, but probably still mainly do the Rob and Trey shows.
So when you say solo bluegrass record, do you mean just you, or do you mean sort of you in a band?
Probably me in a band. I don't know what all will be in that band. I've kind of been writing, for the past several years for a record, and it's like I've done a few bluegrass records, I've done a few country records, and I kind of want to do one of both. But I don't know. It's logistically, it's harder to book country band shows. Having done that, it's kind of, that part of it cannot be fun, having to lug around an amp. So I don't know, if I even want to go down that road for the next little bit. But who knows? I've been feeling really inspired, and I've written a lot of music, and so yeah, I'm, very, very easily might get in the studio and cook up a couple of records at the same time, and see how that goes. Cool.
I mean, it sounds like there's always somewhere new to go, something new to be looking forward to, which is really inspiring to hear. It's been really cool chatting to you. I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on here. I'm been looking forward to this, so I appreciate it.
Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.